Hello, cladders and fans of plans. I'm just going to move this. 1 second, it's fine. And then do a little alakazam. Oh. Sometimes I get a bit dry. So, hello. I'm a bit of a fly in the ointment at your planning conference because I come from the dark side of the chaos of the unplanned end. But as my talk title says that, my talk blurb, if you read it, does qualify that. I don't capitulate to the chaos. I try and work within it. I try and sort it out a bit. And I've learned from it, and I'm going to try and bring those lessons to you today. Oh, we've gone too far. There we go. So, what I intend to do is whip you through what my job actually is, the circumstances I've encountered, the lessons I've learned from that. But it has to be said, the situations that land people with me can't be avoided a lot of the time, which is not the thing to say at a planning conference. But we do live on a rock in an endless vacuum, in feeble bodies that are one bus away from an instant annihilation. So it's naive, really, to cling to ideas like the natural order or control. But I am on message. All of the situations I've seen could have had, with some planning, with some preparation, with some forethought, had some of their excesses at least mitigated, if not completely avoided. So, the situations that land people with me, there's 6 categories. Everyone's unique, but over the years it's crystallized into 6 categories that generally people tend to fall into. Category number 1 is estrangement. Now, there's 2 types of estrangement. There's involuntary, which does happen, and happens more often than you would think. And there's kind of 3 levels of it. The first one is just the sort of bland, the relationships that never really took. Typically siblings that never really got on when they were young. No malice, but just didn't mesh. And when they left the family home, they didn't really keep in touch much, maybe a Christmas card. And then 1 month after one of them's died, I phoned them and let them know the news. At which point, even though the connection was as it was and would have been in reverse had the situation been turned on its head, there's a lot of guilt. And that's why I always have a bit of trouble with the loved one term that gets thrown around, because it's everywhere. It's even in the official documentation. The folder that you get your death certificate in has loved one all over it. And those who've had a low to mediocre relationship are made to feel like they've failed, like everyone else is loving families and they're an outlier. But when I talk to those people and break the news, I always do make sure to tell them that families are chosen for us like married at first sight. So it's probably, not that bad of a thing that you didn't connect. It's more likely than not. Then you get the second level, where relationships have faltered, but there's no ill will. A couple of good examples of this. A man who was very happily married with 2 children injured himself. He had a head injury that changed his personality overnight, and they could no longer live with him. The partner left, then the daughter, then the son, but he did leave him a little dog so that he had someone to love. And they kept an eye on him from afar, and then he just disappeared off 192. They couldn't find him in the listings. He'd gone into a home. He was only 65, they didn't expect that. His head injury had given way to dementia. And he was looking for them, but he couldn't articulate where they were, and they were looking for him, but couldn't find him, and I found them after he died. They'd all become estranged because of the situation, feeling guilty just looking at each other, having all left him. And that funeral brought them back together. And they loved him. It wasn't that they didn't love him, that life had just separated them. And then the top end is kind of similar, but more intense. Dementia, where people forget that they're even married to the person who's died and can't even be told. Or mental health challenges. A man drove into my district, and it's where you die, not where you live, the council that looks after you. So spare a thought for Respawn Borough Council, who have Beachy Head in their district. And he drove into my district and died in his car. He had been hearing voices in his head that he'd wrongly ascribed to being in the walls of his house. So he'd fled. And his sister, when I found her, hadn't seen him for 7 years. but not because she didn't love him, but because you just could not have that connection. It was impossible to hold on to, it was impossible to foster. And so when I do get these people, there is a lot of kind of disenfranchised grief almost, people that feel, how do I grieve something that I didn't have or that I couldn't have? And it's very complex, and it's very difficult to break that news. So there is also the voluntary estrangement, the very, very voluntary estrangement that you think of when I say that word, the if you walk out that door, don't ever come back. And we obviously get a lot more of that than we do the involuntary. A lot of my coroner's referrals will come with the qualifying line, 2 children, haven't spoken for 30 years. When I phone those people, they either hang up on me immediately or they talk to me and tell me everything. I'm this neutral space that's just broken the news of someone's death. It's very traumatic or troubling, and all of the story comes out. And they will want to come to that funeral because they just want to draw a line under this person. The other people don't even want to know because they've drawn a line long before. And those funerals can be really useful for some people. I was referred one man who, when I found out he was council housed, and I phoned housing to tell them, they weren't relieved he died, but they were relieved I was phoning not about another incident involving him. He'd been moved 4 times around 4 different towns, because every town he was housed in, he would be banned from all of the shops within a year. The taxi driver I found, who was his friend, told me that he would lash out at people with his stick. He was always baseline enraged. And by the time I found him, he was just about to have to be moved from where he was because he was having to go shopping out of district with this taxi driver. When I found his daughter, and I found her by Googling his full name, he had a really unusual surname. And she was on one of those Facebook groups for people who go, I've got the same weird name, so have I, and they all join in and show their names. And she'd posted some photos of her dad on there when he was a kid. And she told me exactly what had happened to him that had made him the way he was. And I could fully understand how he'd ended up that way. But also there was a lot of pain from her. He'd left 5 families, and he'd committed violence to all of them. He'd pushed one of his wives down the stairs when pregnant. So there's a sort of a troubling situation that comes to me, semi-unresolved, and the funeral kind of resolves it, kind of draws a line under it. And I had to be really careful not to judge the situation, because I didn't know either party. And there's a really good book by Pope Lonergan called I'll Die After Bingo, which is about his work in a care home. And he says, well, he's kind of the same as me. He meets people very diminished. I meet them much more diminished. But he meets them when they're very old and when their best days are behind them. And he knows from speaking to people coming to visit them that they were domestic abusers, they were very scary. And now they can't even get out of a chair. But he treats them neutrally because he says in the book, what good is it, me judging a frail old man? That's family stuff. And I'm the same. It's family stuff. They can tell me, I can hear it, I can listen. But I just have to do a neutral job for that service, for that family. So, after estranged, we have outlived. You have the kind of traditional lived to 100, beat everyone winner, sort of. The most classic one I had of that category was a 99-year-old who, she was delightful. She had ice cream for lunch every day. She knew what she wanted. And she used to write poems about her best friend with dementia who kept imaginary chickens. And she wrote a poem about her knickers that we read out at her funeral, and that was published in the book because it was always her wish to be published, so I made sure that happened. But pure genius is only appreciated after its own lifetime, so she's like Vincent van Gogh. And, you know, everyone at the care home loved her. So by rights, she should have had that full chapel that we all associate with a life well lived, which is wrong, by the way. Your funeral is not a scorecard. It's not your final exam. It's hard enough to get everyone round for a barbecue. So if you've lived to that long, I mean, really, if you want a full house, you have to die at about 35. You don't want to do that. You won't be there.
I think the problem is, well, you will be there, but you know. The problem is the tyranny of legacy. So I totally value legacy, and I look for the personality behind all the people I have to do a funeral for. But it haunts us all our lives. And even though we don't talk about death, we all live with the end in mind. I thought I'd made this up, right? But Mark Twain said it first, annoyingly. Fear of death is a fear of life. Because you're walking around trying to accumulate the achievements that will sound good when they're read over a box with you two dead to hear it. And you're trying to accumulate the deathbed crowd, because if no one's holding my hand, I've failed. And if no one's crying at my funeral, I've failed. Life happens. You know, that's why I was throwing shade at the natural order earlier. I've done a funeral for a lady who died alone on the bathroom floor, which is the archetypal lonely death that we all dread. And that's why I tell these stories and wrote the book, because everyone sees my people through the 3 a.m. prism of their own fears and others them. I'd never die alone on the bathroom floor. Yes, you may. You may die on the bathroom floor, because she had 2 children and a husband. One of her children died during childhood. It happens. The other one was in hospital very ill when she died, and her husband had predeceased her. It wasn't that nobody loved her. Nobody was there. It's like me trying to judge you on 2:30 p.m. yesterday. That's you. Done. No more. No context, just that. So I try and make sure that people, while we still celebrate legacy and achievement, maybe we don't look at it as something to get to the end with, but we just look at it as something we do throughout our lives for our own enjoyment and our own pleasure now, while we're alive, while we actually can know we're doing it. So we've had estranged, solitary. Oh, solitary's next. Estranged, outlived. Forget I said that. Solitary, surprising. What's she going to say next? Solitary is our third category. Now, we've got 2 types of solitary as well. Involuntary solitary, which is lovely fun to say. And it's sad. Sometimes people get pushed into solitude through familial loss with that lady, or spousal loss, like this gentleman whose window we have here. When I arrived at his house, it was like Sleeping Beauty's sort of castle. It was all covered in vines and leaves. And then when we went in, on his bedside table was the order of service of his wife's funeral from the 1990s. So you can kind of guess, but you are guessing, because I don't know, he might have been having a ball, but you can kind of guess that he was pretty sad and stuck. And then sometimes there are other clues and other cues, like we went into one guy's house, and his wife had died before him, and everyone I spoke to said that she was everything to him. But he'd leaned into it. He'd pushed all of their furniture out of the way and made a giant model railway layout, which he obviously wouldn't have been allowed to, which she was like. So he was sad, but getting on with it. And then there's some people who are voluntary solitary, which is slightly less fun to say, but still fun. And you can get clues from them as well. When you walk in, you're like, oh, this is fine. They were fine. One man, I walked into his living room and there was one armchair, no other chairs. He was not expecting guests. And his chair had magazines, books, TV, open fire, music system, electric guitar. It was like, this guy's fine. He doesn't have to leave the house. And as we went on and found people who knew him, the neighbor, we sort of pull at threads as we go. The neighbor's the first person to ask. So, what's he like? We didn't speak. Not that we didn't like him, he didn't like to speak to people. He'd nod, he'd smile, but you didn't speak to him. You left your thank you wine outside his front door if he'd watered your plants, you know. They knew not to speak to him or bother him. And everyone I found, when I Googled him, I found he was a gardening club member. Everyone I found at the gardening club couldn't tell me anything about him at all. He never speaks. But we liked him. He was really nice. You know, if you said you liked one of his plants, he'd grow you one for a year and just turn up with it without saying anything, just give it to you. Eventually, I found his first and only girlfriend, who told me that his whole family, except for him, were deaf and nonverbal. He just liked quiet, and he found other people quite stressful. But he liked other people. He was sociable. He had really rich interests. But he just had trouble with noise. And he'd sat out bowel cancer in his house. There were buckets of excrement. He just died on his own. But he died as he lived. When I spoke to his girlfriend, she said he wouldn't have wanted to go into hospital. he would not have wanted health visitors in his house. So I always do say to people who, when I say that my job is arranging funerals for people without family or money, and they go, oh, how tragic. Not necessarily. Some people die as they live. Some people wanted to be alone. You can't judge them by you wanting to be around people. Everyone's very different. And that's why we have to be very different in all of our approaches to everyone's funerals, because everyone's unique. So, after solitary, you have a kind of related category, outcast. They're on their own for a reason. It's an uncomfortable category. It's hard to make it feel good. It's usually someone who's committed sex crimes, around children typically. I've only brushed up against this once with a man who both of the executors and best friends that were dealing with his estate were convicted sex offenders, child sex offenders, and when he died, they took his computer to fix it. So I was like, oh, okay. But you have to do the job. This is the point of the job. And when I did a funeral once that got a lot of media interest, one of the papers decided to try and turn it into some sort of feel-good story and said, oh, it's great. The whole community came out and crowdfunded it. Because there were 100 people there, they assumed the 100 people had crowdfunded it. And I made them correct the online article, partly because the council deserves its credit, it's doing the work, no one really knows we do, but partly because that's a terrifying idea that you would have to rely on the goodwill of other people. And again, it makes you scared, that 3 a.m. thing about, what if I die alone? What if no one cares? You need that neutral service that catches anyone who falls through the cracks for any reason whatsoever. That's the real feel-good story. Now, after that one, we have unidentified, unclaimed, displaced. The unidentified person was the person I was doing the funeral for. They had 115 mourners, because if you die unidentified, don't be worried about that. You'll have a rock star funeral. Everyone comes out for you, because they do not want anyone to go alone and unnamed, and they will make sure that that doesn't happen to anyone else, which is one of the nice things I've learned in this job, that nobody, even unclaimed remains, have nobody. This week I was referred a box of 100-year-old bones. That's going to be a challenge. But again, I reckon on a lot of people want to come to the funeral of some 100-year-old bones, so I don't think they'll be going alone, even if we don't know who they are. So in addition to the unidentified people that we get, displaced people, people who've died far from home, not just the guy who drove in from another district. I've had people die in hotels, asylum seekers, while they were waiting to be processed. Grossly long waiting times that have caused them to take their own lives. Their families can't afford to repatriate them. They can't afford to come here. We have to do something for those people. And people who are literally found dead in the council district. The act, I can do it really quickly for you, that we work under is, it shall be the duty of a local authority to cause to be buried or cremated the body of anyone who dies or is found dead in their area where it appears no arrangements for the disposal, horrible word, of the body are being made. That's all we're working under. It's quite low maintenance act. So these people who are found dead are sometimes the street homeless. And my colleague before me did a funeral for a guy, a street drinker. And he had all of his street drinker friends come along and pour a drink on his coffin. And he was really worried, this guy, because the deceased's brother was also there. He was worried it would upset him. But he actually found it quite beautiful. And that's another thing I wrote the book for, to show that our funerals are not these dismal affairs that people like to think they are. The media like to call them paupers, and they like to put on a sad voice when they talk about them. I had a BBC reporter come to one of our funerals, which was an absolute success. We found 3 people for a 97-year-old who all knew him really well. And they said, a pauper's funeral, an empty room and a chipboard coffin. It's just not very helpful. So, yeah. This guy had these drinks poured on, and it was beautifully ritualistic. And the same with the quiet man from earlier, the gardening club. It was a heat wave when he died. And they poured water on his plants every day, kept them wet, kept them alive. And then his plants that he was growing for the gardening club competition, and had won most years, they picked them and they bunched them and they turned them into a coffin spray. And so we get these kind of It's not traditional mourning. My celebrant often says, you know, you may not have felt anything as strong as love because he's talking to a hairdresser, a carer, you know, a friend, but you're here and it proved that they mattered. And I learned a lot at this death conference in Berlin. What a cliche I am. Death conference in Berlin, it may as well have been in black and white. About finding rituals where we've got nothing to hold on to, we've got a vacuum. A lot of people in this fishing village in West Africa don't have bodies being returned to them. This Danish academic was living there studying how they were doing funerals for all these people lost in the Med. There's no bodies, what do we do? And they were laying out the people's clothes and calling their spirit back from the sea and doing a funeral for the clothes. In Los Angeles, babies that are found dead around the city are given funerals by parents who've lost babies. And they coffin the baby and they cradle each round the grave until it's placed. So that's another thing, that we'll always find a way of taking a sad situation and trying to resolve it with a ritual or something meaningful. And then after that category, we've got the one that's pretty universal and is on the rise, which is no money. The cost of living crisis very much is the cost of dying crisis. And 1 in 5 people can't afford a funeral. And of those 1 in 5, only 10% come to us at the council and the DWP. Everyone else, the 90%, are really hiding up the full extent of funeral poverty by taking out loans, selling their stuff, getting credit. That's going to be harder and harder to keep going as we've reached 4,000 now and it's on the way up from there. You won't be able to extend that much credit. And the council, at a time when our budget's going down there, are getting demand coming up here. And what with the stigma of the funerals we have, it's not satisfactory to people. I was in Anglesey in January, and I was in a prehistoric burial chamber where they carved on the wall these images that when you saw them by torchlight would appear to dance. And it struck me that even before people were really fully developed, had language in every culture, in every race, religion and country, we've all got a ritual because we all in ourselves, in our gut, know that when someone dies, something has to be done. So to deny people that because of money seems absolutely ludicrous and cruel. And we say cradle to grave in this country, and I don't know why, because it isn't. It hasn't been for a very long time. It's cradle to very expensive care home to very expensive casket. It was cradle to grave, that's why we say it. The Beveridge report has a very simple line in it that laid the way for the welfare state. Everyone who dies needs a funeral. It's quite straightforward. And yes, we do. We can't avoid it. Well, you know, that guy who's on Instagram trying to live forever is trying to, but we can't avoid it. And we shouldn't be held to expensive ransom to have the ritual. Now I'm going to go on a quick tangent and say, as a small district council, I buy in, it's terrible to say, bulk, and so I get a discount, I get half price. Imagine what the government could get for a national funeral service to go on the back end of a national care service and health service. It's a big dream considering the way things are at the moment, but I will keep going on about it until everyone's agitated and going, yeah, why am I paying £4,000? And we all rise up. So that's all the circumstances that get people on my desk. What happens when they get there, and how on earth do I find out what they want? Well, it's a difficult one. As you know, a lot of people don't plan, don't talk, don't leave wills, don't leave advanced care plans that give us a clue about who they were, don't talk about funerals, don't talk about death. And a lot of people who end up with me have got no one to advocate for them anyway. So I have to do those clues, walking through the house, looking for evidence of a religion, or some sort of wish written on the back of a cigarette packet, or speak to the neighbours, then find a friend. Anything that can tell me what I'm doing, because there's a subsection of section 46 that says, you will not cremate where you have reason to believe that is not what the deceased wanted. And that haunts my dreams, because burial is very specific and we only really reserve it for people who definitely want it, either religion or wishes. And one time I was referred a guy who, his flat showed no evidence of anything. And it was a fair shout that he will cremate. I think that's a fair shout, will cremate. And then I found his daughter and said, what were his wishes actually? Did he ever talk to you about them? Oh yeah, he always used to say, please don't let them burn me. It's like, that is awful, that he didn't write that down, and if she hadn't come out of the woodwork, he would have been cremated. So it's really crucial to get those wishes. We also are left with an estate, a load of loose ends to close down, and also who are we giving it to? So when we do the house search, we're looking for three things. We're first of all doing our public health duty, because it's public health legislation. So your last scraps of your dinner, they have to go in the bin, sometimes plate and all if it's been months. We're emptying out all of the fruit bowl and all of the perishable items, and we're taking the bin out one last time. Once we've done being cleaning lady, we're looking for your admin from my book title. The first thing we're looking for is a will. A will would give us an executor, a contact, and it would give us your wishes, both for your estate and for yourself. If we can't find a will, which is very rare, we're looking for a funeral plan. If not a funeral plan, some sort of written down something. And if not a funeral plan or written down something, maybe extra evidence like where someone's died before them and they've cremated them. That shows that maybe they're not averse. There was one person who was referred to me, and this shows the strength of an advanced care plan, or some sort of paperwork that you take with you into the care system. She'd gone into the care system and had been through 4 homes. When I found someone who was friends with her, they said, did you find her donation papers, her body donation papers? No, she was without anything. She was at this care home with just some puzzle books and a Twix. It's just mostly the possessions that are in care home rooms. They're not very revealing. So I phoned the care home before that. They didn't have them. The care home before that, they didn't have them. And before, no one had them. She'd had her house cleared to go into care, and it had all gone in the bin. But the one good thing about going back that far is that I found where she lived. So I drove there and put my phone number through all of the doors, and then got the information that gave me what she would have probably wanted for a funeral, which is she'd cremated her husband at this cemetery in 2017 and scattered him here. Brilliant, we cremate her there and scatter her there. But these things are so hard to get. The other thing we're looking for, in addition to a will, in addition to wishes, the base admin, your bank statement, your gas, electric. These people need to be told. There's going to be a million loose ends. Think of all the things you have. Think of all the things you're signed up to, all of the stuff in your inbox that's locked behind a password that no one could know you've got. That stuff's going to hang forever, potentially. Maybe it's not a problem, but it's nice to just get things done, close things down, not have letters coming through the door 6 months later. Not just for people like me, but for your next of kin. It's terrible to have to keep reporting someone dead several times throughout the year. It's nice if it could all be in one place and they could know and they could do it in one go. And we're looking for the person as well. We're looking at their books. We're looking at their music. We're thinking about what we're going to play at the ceremony if we end up doing it. We're looking for their people so that we can hand it back to someone to do it if they don't know. The brother I phoned, he ended up taking that funeral back from us. But if we don't find the brother or the relative or the person who's responsible, we're looking for friends, club members, people who can tell us about them and who can make a proper service that makes sense for that person's life. So what are the lessons I've learned and things I need you to do and everyone in the world to do, ideally, to make my job easier, but to also make your next of kin's job easier or whoever it is behind you? The first obvious thing is make a will. I know not everyone's a property owner, but you will have possibly more than £500 left at the end, we hope. And any estate over £500 that I get left with, I have to refer it to Treasury solicitors, the government, for them to either use a tracing service to find that apocryphal third cousin twice removed who'll get that phone call. One person really got the best phone call ever. They got a phone call. They didn't know this guy at all. It was a really distant relative, and it was 17 million they got. So that, you know, never lose hope. But do you want your stuff to go to the government? I mean, you know, some of the times that I've referred things to the government, it would have ended up going to one of Matt Hancock's friends. You know, you maybe want some more control. So if you've got, like there's this one guy I did a funeral for who hadn't got round to writing his will. His parents had been absolutely spot on and got everything organised and left it all to him, and then he let it all go, and it went to Treasury. And he had a godson who his friend said he would have loved to have given a start to. Now government's got it. If you live in the Duchy of Lancaster, King Charles will get it. And if you live in the Duchy of Cornwall, Prince Will's. So leave it to the cats, for the love of God. And also a will, like I say, tells us your wishes. Cremate me, bury me. So that's good to have. And an advanced care plan is great to have, because I know that you'll be dead by the time you come to me, but we'll know the story of you, which really helps. One guy, I found his CV. That was great. His entire life, his schooling, and a personal statement. But we could do that as well. We could leave stuff, a breadcrumb trail of things we want people to know. So the thing I've got, and a thing I would recommend everyone do, is I've got one kitchen cupboard of death. And it's got, in a folder, it's got my birth certificate. Because when I register people, I really like to know place of birth, you know, middle name. I hate going into the registrar and they say occupation while living. I don't know. Married? Don't know. And sometimes, though, those baseline questions can bring up some really interesting answers. I was phoning the care home and said, right, marital status, married for a week, but no one was allowed to talk about it. That's going in the service. So I want those bits of information. So I've put my own birth certificate in there, my national insurance card, my passport, my V5. Any officialdom is in this folder. My advanced care plan. Everything's in there. And then on top of this pile of useful documents, I've got a book. And the first page I've written, if you're reading this, I'm dead. Because you never get to do that unless you're in an apocalyptic film. And I just basically say, this is my bank, this is my savings, this is my phone, this is my internet. You know, because I walk around people's houses going, is that a skybox? I don't know. You know, who am I telling? And I know there are going to be loose ends. But if you come to my house, you'll be able to shut down everything, right down to HelloFresh. You know, it's done. And you can do it in a day. You can just get it done. It's done forever. And the other stuff that I've put in this book, the stuff you don't think about. Where's your car parked? Because mine's in a garage block round the corner, and it's the third one to the right. So I've written that. The amount of times I've walked the streets with central locking keys. You know, give people a clue. If you were to evaporate right now, is basically what I'm saying, think of all the things no one would know. If you're not married to your partner or live in, write their phone number down. Write the phone number of your best friend, because next of kin is the only show in town for the coroner. So if you want people to know within less than a month, because I work as hard as I can to make it less than a month, but it's not easy, get those phone numbers written down as well. Stick in what you want for your funeral. Stick in the information about, I've got my body donation papers in there, and I've put in bold, there's body donation papers in there, and I've got a little card in my wallet saying that too. This is a war that has to be fought on all fronts. Because, as I say about that woman who went into the care system and didn't get her wishes, the last thing I would sort of suggest for everyone is when women have babies, they have a grab bag for the hospital. You need a grab bag for the care system, for the hospital, for your time when you're whipped away and you're too out of it or weak or ill to know, and it's too late for you to say, there's a load of stuff back there that social care have just thrown in a skip. You need it with you, copies of everything, copies of your will, copies of your wishes, copies of your funeral plan, your contacts, so that people like me can phone people, tell people in time, get people along, give you a meaningful service with the right method that we're doing, burial, cremation, and everything you want done afterwards. Where do you want to be scattered? Trying to give out ashes is a nightmare. You know, just all of the things that we need to know about you. And then once you've put it all in the cupboard, do the important thing and get on with enjoying your life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Evie. So I've read your book, and it's also available on Audible, and you narrate it, don't you? And it's really, really good, funny. It's brilliant. Anyway, so what you were talking about, the grab bags, we have them. They're called yellow folders.
Thank you.
So when you go and explore the stands, the yellow folders that is exactly what should be in there, all the information that you need. So this is what we're trying to roll out. So go and have an exploration of the stands. I'll stop talking. So questions, Stephen.
Yeah, I've got one question and one comment. So the comment is from Rosedale Funeral Home. They say, I work in the funeral industry and often support families with complicated grief due to family dynamics. support for these families is so vital, more funding needs to be in place to offer this support.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of complex grief left in the wake of this stuff.
And the question is from an anonymous attendee. If you are doing a funeral for someone who cannot afford it, does this mean that friends cannot attend? As I had a situation where I called the council and they said if they did the funeral, the friend couldn't attend unless they paid for it.
Yeah, this is the problem with the Act. It's 5 lines long, and it literally only requires us to dispose of a body. The reason for this is it's public health legislation, so it's concerned purely with remains, not the person. And the reason it's about remains and being found dead is it was written in 1984, 3 years before the funeral grant was taken away. So it didn't envisage a world where families would be coming to us. And it didn't see a world where families would have to come to the environmental health department for their person's funeral. So what happens is, because we've only got this tiny legislation, some councils, due to funding-based policy decisions, don't do a funeral service at all. Some will do one but won't allow anyone to attend. I don't know why, it doesn't cost anything. Some will not return ashes, very rare, but there are some that will charge for ashes or refuse to return them. Some sort of way of, councils do a difficult job, and I'm not judging any council because we're on our knees. 1 in 5 of us is going bankrupt. So I'm working in an attic with no fire escape. But like I said about the ritual, you can do a lot of damage if you don't give people the respect, if you say your grief isn't worth anything because you can't afford it. So it's only a small amount of money in the grand scheme of things. And for a couple of £100 for a celebrant or a religious representative, £600 to £800 for the service room, and a half-price funeral director, you're doing it for under £2,000, which I think by anyone's stretch is not a lot of money. To give that closure, the family of the man with the head injury reunited after 10 years of being apart. You know, it's really healing. So I would sort of say to any council that can't do a funeral because top-down is saying no, be creative. I've started trialling Sunset and Twilight, Sunrise and Twilight attended direct. So there's no ceremony, but you don't go through the back door on your own. You'll walk through the front door to music, and your family can follow, say 5 minutes of goodbye, and at least you feel like you've been there. Just try and be creative. But we always, by the way, let everyone attend, and we want everyone there.
Thank you. Another question up here.
Sorry.
Hey.
Considering how long ago the legislation was made, do you think that it will change or update?
I've written to Angela Rayner. I haven't heard back because she's now the local government rep. It should. It should. In 2020, the government did have the wherewithal to write some good practice guidance for us. So it's very simple to change the word disposal to funeral and service, and to get some of the good practice from the good practice guidance into a legal framework. You just need to do it. I don't think death's anyone's interest. Everyone's like trying to avoid it so hard in their own life that they
One
wouldn't.
of the only things that happens to everyone.
Yeah, and so I have got set text on my Goodreads blog that I sent to her, and that I asked people to send their MPs just to update Section 46 to make it more humane. And put those good practice guidance bits into law, not just guidance, because guidance can be ignored. When they say it shall be the duty, shall, legislation-wise, means you can't avoid it. So if it shall be the duty to give a funeral service, you can't get out of it, but at the moment you can get out of it.
So many things that have been changed to assist with funding or expectations in regards to responses from the government or responses from councils or legal aspects. Why can't it change it in the positive for general people?
Why not indeed? It should. And I'll keep writing to Angela Rayner, and I'll keep writing to my MP until it does.
I can feel a revolution coming on.
Oh yeah.
Come on, Evie.
We can do this.
Any other questions? Oh, Stephen at the back, and then...
I say, do you have, this is from Katie Green, so do you have access to GP notes as we advocate holding some paperwork like leaving body to medical science, advanced directives, etc.?
No, everything's so fragmented. I went on Facebook groups the other day to try and find an estranged husband or an estranged brother of someone 30 years standing, and someone commented, "Doesn't the council know this stuff?" And it's like, where would I have stored someone's estranged husband's whereabouts? So people, expect us to be able to join up a lot. And a lot of it would make sense to join up, then be able to go to the GP, being able to access things, but you just keep coming up against walls of GDPR, even though GDPR expires upon death. But try telling banks that, they won't talk to you. I had a massively frustrating conversation with Pets at Home, who I got to this man's house and there was a big pile of boxes outside, and I looked inside and oh my God, it's fresh pet food. This must stop. Rats, advertising an empty property, pointless existential errand for the driver. Took the invoice out and took it back to the office. Instant messaged them, this man, this date of birth, this address, this invoice number needs to stop. And they went, "Can't talk to you, you're not next of kin." I said, that's ridiculous because not everyone has next of kin. People are living in a cloud cuckoo land of a world where everyone does. And she said, all right then, GDPR. So, oh yeah, pull that one out then. And I said, GDPR expires upon death, and anyway, I'm telling you stuff, not asking you. And she said, well, I can't speak to you. And I said, well, out of interest, what are you going to do? Keep sending the pet food until his card expires. So that's the world we're in. But we try as much as we can to work with social care because they can be a bit more open, but it's really fragmented and hard to unite and connect.
A short question. Who looks after you?
I was saying this in the office the other day. I got 2 funerals in a day and I went, oh, and who's going to do my funeral? Probably Muggins. I think it'll be okay because I've donated my body, although that's not guaranteed because if I'm not found for a while, that's not a goer. And I don't have any children, so I'm probably going to do what, I'm probably going to do the same as a lot of the people I look after, but it's fine, that'll be someone else's problem. There'll be money in my estate, and that's a good hack. You can debit a deceased person's estate before any will reading or anything like that. I'll be going to the bank with a death certificate and a funeral bill, and they raise a cheque to the funeral home because funerals have first call on any estate, which is what I had to tell a family of rowing millionaires who left their person 100 days in a funeral home while they argued about the estate. And I had to phone them up and go, well, cut it, because you can't have the estate until you've done the funeral. It has first call. And that's when they decided to break the impasse and do the funeral.